Last time we talked about learning by modelling or copying other people. Today we're going to look at that process in a little bit more detail, go into some of the subtleties that really make it work well, and we're also going to answer the question, who is the most important person in the world for you to model, and how do you do that? When we talk about that at the end, I think that you might be surprised at the answer. Remember that last time we used the idea of a child learning to walk to explain modelling. And children learn to walk by noticing what other people are doing and copying them. As an adult, we seem to lose that ability, or we seem to forget how to do it. And instead, we tend to learn by intellectualizing about things. We learn from explaining things in great detail. We make lists of instructions. We make flowcharts and diagrams. We learn from books and videos. But learning to walk was not an intellectual process, and it was one of the hardest things that we've ever learned to do. And actually, if we did try to intellectualize that, it just would not happen. If I hold my arm out and I rotate it, and then I rotate my wrist and move all of my fingers, it takes round about 100 muscles to do that. Now, imagine trying to explain to somebody how to do that. Imagine trying to consciously control all of those muscles independently. It just would never happen. And learning to walk, and walking takes a lot more muscles than that, because it takes the muscles in both of our legs, our feet, our ankles. It takes all of the muscles in our back for balance, and then we use our arms when we're walking as well. So learning to walk probably uses almost every muscle in our body. If we try to intellectualize about that, we just could never do it. And maybe that's why children don't learn the power of language until after they learn to walk, because it'd probably get in the way. So the question then becomes, why do we want to go back to modelling as adults? We've learnt this intellectual stuff. We've learnt about explaining things and writing lists and reading books and watching videos. Why don't we want to keep learning in that way? Well, in the same way that children could never learn the subtleties of walking if we tried to put it in a diagram, some of the skills that we want to learn as adults, we can learn bits of them by learning in an intellectual way. But the real subtleties of it are too complex, and the only way that we can learn them is by copying other people. So let's say that you want to become better as a public speaker, and maybe you don't, but I'm just using this as an example. You can apply this to absolutely anything. It all begins with a desire to want to learn a skill better than you have it, or to want to learn a new skill. And the first question that you have to ask yourself is, who is it that's really good at speaking in public, at standing in front of a stage and commanding a room and putting across their ideas in a clear and concise manner and connecting with people in the audience? Who are the experts? Who are the people that I want to use as role models? And notice I use the word expert, but it doesn't have to be people who are world champions. It doesn't have to be people who are the best in the world. It just simply needs to be people who are competent that you can learn something from. Remember here as well that we're not trying to become that person. All we're trying to do is find a little aspect that makes them good at what they do. So the next question you ask yourself is, what is it that makes them good? And actually that's slightly misleading what I've said there, because by asking the question, what is it that makes them good, we're making it an intellectual process. And in the same ways you can't learn to walk by intellectualizing things, you can't learn the subtleties of a skill in that way either. So actually, what you really want to be doing is just noticing. When the person, when the expert, when the role model is performing this skill, what do you notice about them? And it might be when the person's speaking in front of a room full of people, you notice that their shoulders are relaxed. You might notice that they're standing up tall. Or you might notice that most of the time their hands are down by their side, and every now and again they bring them up to emphasize a point, then put them down by their side again. Or you might notice the way that they make eye contact with the room. And what you do then is you pick one or two of those elements and you try it on for size, you practice it. Remember we talked about mental rehearsal. You imagine that you're standing in front of the room making your next presentation, and you just do one or two of the things that you've noticed. You relax your shoulders a little bit, or you keep your hands a little bit stiller than you normally would, and you notice what difference it makes. And notice here that we're not talking about changing a lot of things all at the same time, because if you did that, first of all, it's overwhelming. How can you remember to do all of that when you're trying to deliver your presentation as well? And also, how would you know which one made the difference? So this is about taking one or two little things and seeing what makes a difference. And what you probably find is that when you're practicing this and you do relax your shoulders a little bit, then you probably feel a little bit more confident. Or it might be keeping your hands still that does it for you. But once you start to feel a little bit more confident, then you'll relax more anyway. And as you relax more, then you'll naturally start to make your presentation a little bit better. And as you start to make your presentation a little bit better, then you start to become a little bit more confident. You start to relax a little bit more, and you get on this positive progressive cycle. So I think the key for this when we're trying to model other people is, first of all, pick one or two little things that you're going to copy. But the second thing is, don't intellectualize the process. It's just about noticing. And noticing itself is a skill. The more that we do it, the better we'll become at it, and we'll start to notice finer and finer subtleties. And as we start to apply those finer and finer subtleties to what we're doing, we'll become even better at what we're doing, even faster. And remember, this is a gradual process. Children don't one day stand up and start to walk. It's a gradual process at getting better at it. Going back now to the question I asked at the beginning, who is the most important person in the world for you to model? Would it surprise you to know that it's yourself? And think about it. You've had days when you were really, really good at whatever it was that you were doing, that you probably surprised yourself with, and you exceeded your own expectation at just how good you are. When things that sometimes are difficult for you were just flowing, were effortless. When you're doing that, you want to model that, because remember, we're not trying to be other people. We're trying to be ourselves. You're trying to be yourself, but just a better version of yourself. So on the days when that seems to happen naturally, wouldn't it make sense to capture it and model it and learn from it? The really great thing is that when we're modeling ourselves, we've got so much more to model as well. When we're copying other people, really all we can copy is what we can see, what we can notice with our eyes and hear with our ears. When we're modelling ourselves, we can also model what's happening in here, the internal things as well as the external things. Now, it's probably true that you can't model yourself in the moment, and probably true that when you're in that great flow state, you probably don't want to be doing it anyway. You want to be getting on with whatever you're doing. But you want to, as soon as you've realised that you are having your best day, as soon as possible afterwards, that's when you want to start noticing what was going on for you. And it might be something physical. It might be that you were standing up more straight than you normally do. It might be that you were speaking louder than you normally do, or speaking slower or faster than you normally do. But what is happening in here? What were you saying to yourself? What tone of voice were you using when you were saying it? How loud was that tone of voice? Was it over here? Was it over here? What pictures were you creating inside your head? And once you start to get into these level of subtleties, there's so many things that you can notice. And again, you take one of them and you apply it on purpose and see what difference it makes. And you start to build up this bank of all these little subtle changes that you can make that are going to get you into that flow state, get you into being your best day on purpose. Now, whether we're talking about modelling ourselves or modelling other people, an important thing to remember is that this is going to make little changes, and be okay with this. Again, using the example, children don't suddenly one day get up and learn to walk. It is a process. But if you notice that a person who's good at public speaking relaxes their shoulders, and you relax your shoulders and it helps you a little bit, isn't it worth doing? If you realise that when you get up to talk in front of a room, if the last thing you say to yourself before you leave your seat is, "You're going to be great today," if that makes a little difference, isn't it worth doing? Because isn't it true that if you take little differences and you stack them on top of each other, then lots of little differences become a big difference? Or even if you only change one thing, even if you only learn one thing and you keep doing it, one thing done well and multiplied by time becomes a big change. Now, I hope that I've explained this in a way that's made it easy for you to understand, because it's a very subtle, very simple process, but once you start to apply it, you're going to get incredible results from it. So I hope that I've done it justice and explained it in a way that you can understand it and you can start to use it. If I haven't, please let me know in the comment or send me a message, and I'll do my best to clarify it and to make it in a way that you can understand. There's lots of other things that we could talk about around modelling. We've only just scratched the surface of it, so at some point I will come back to this. I'm not going to do it in the next video, but at some point I'll come back to this and we'll start to look at it at an even deeper level. I'll see you soon.